r/ask Reddit. Reddit. What's the most chaotic good thing you've ever seen? Kid I went high school with was a 2-time state champion wrestler. He was terrifying. Built like a brick shit house by the time he was 14. By the time he was 18 he was a solid wall of muscle. He was also a vicious prick, highly aggressive, and a big time bully to other bullies. This kid would beat the ever-loving shit out of anyone who ducked with someone that couldn't defend themselves. If he saw a bigger kid ducking with a smaller kid, they were toast. Dude was the ducking Superman of my school. If anyone was giving you shit, you went to him. He'd take care of it after school. Had a pretty chill dude like that back in my high school too. We'll call him John. At 15 he was built like an absolute beast. Not tall but rock solid wrestler with the muscle tone of an apple. Some 22-year-old would hang out around the high school a lot looking for girls. We'll call him Chad. Chad decides he's going to beat up a 16-year-old kid. We'll call Mike. Over a girl they both like. Mike's a bit big for his age and agrees to fight even though it's a definite mismatch. A bunch of us went to watch it after school. This was more than 20 years ago. Chad gets in a good hit or two early and clearly wins. Mike is on the ground and says I'm done. Chad then takes a cheap shot kick to Mike's face that was just awful and honestly could have paralyzed him or worse. At this point John the 15-year-old rips off his own shirt and proceeds to absolutely pummel 22-year-old Chad until he's crying and sobbing that he's sorry. It wasn't even close. And was somehow extra amusing because Chad was like a foot taller but just completely outmatched. I don't recall ever seeing Chad hanging around the high school after that. Was at a market in Mozambique with a guide. Guide asks stall seller if he has any really fresh pangolin, illegal as hell and endangered. And seller shows him a box with 2 live ones. Guide turns to me and yells run, punches a seller, grabs the box, and books it across the market toward where we had parked. He released the critters later that day. It was an interesting trip. Whoa, this is fantastic. Lawful good. Call the cops to have the animals confiscated. Vendor cited or arrested. Neutral good. Bought the animals and released them later. Chaotic good. Punch the vendor. Steal the animals and run. I knew someone who once played an extended prank on a friend where he filled up his gas tank. When the tank was low he'd steal his keys, sneak out, go to the station, fill it up, bring the car back and put the keys back. Took him months to figure out what was going on. Why can't someone prank me like this? My mum. She's a guerrilla gardener. She's in her early 60s and she goes out at night with a gang of her pensioner mates and plants flowers, sows seeds and tidies neglected public land, like roundabouts and grass verges. I'm pretty sure she knows who's been yarn bombing round here too, but she refuses to grass them up. Not something I saw, but something my brother saw. He was on a bus in London, and this elderly woman got on. There were no free seats, but this was largely because 2 teenagers were spreading themselves out across 2 seats each. This big, hulking South African guy tells them to move up and make room for her. They swear at him and give all that cokey attitude teenagers are famous for. He gets up, yanks one of them to his feet, shoves him back so that he's sitting in one seat, and in the thickest Afrikaans accent you could possibly imagine, tells him plainly you must be very careful who you're rude to. Hey, they ducking back down after that. I read that in a Skyrim Whiterun guard voice. I was at a party and someone wearing kilt was forcing sunscreen on everyone. He would say hi in the nicest voice and offer you one of his beers, but only if you put sunscreen on. He was the coolest. When you said forcing sunscreen on people I imagined him jumping out of the bushes and just slathering you in sunscreen. One of my friends stole a ladder from a garage to help a kid down from a tree and then put it back. My sister and her husband tried to train their corgi to bark at their cat whenever the cat broke one of the house rules. Unfortunately, the corgi never had a firm grasp on the cat rules and at this point he's just making up his own cat rules to try to enforce. Sister just had her first baby a couple weeks ago. Corgi feels like this is an important development and he should have a role. Corgi decides that his role is to protect the baby from the cat, which involves a lot of barking at the cat while the baby is sleeping. I love dogs, and would never seriously call them stupid, but I feel like this is too complicated of a job for the dog. Definitely the French secret society led UX. They built an amazing, fully stocked wooden bar and movie theater in the catacombs that had been in use for some years when it was discovered by Parisian utility workers. Later, a team of UX commandos secretly fixed an iconic broken clock in the Pantheon. From Wikipedia, the UX for Urban Experiment is an underground organization that improves hidden corners of Paris. Their works have included restoring the Pantheon clock, building a cinema, complete with bar and restaurant, underneath the Trocadero, restoring medieval crypts, and staging plays and reelings in monuments after dark. The group's membership is largely secret. And then the administration stopped the clock from working by removing one of its parts. I didn't see it personally, but I heard the story from this guy's roommate, who did get to witness it. It's freshman year of college. Two of my neighbors, Colin and George, are rushing the same frat. My roommate had a thing for George, so she invited him and his roommates over for breakfast one morning. We ask about what they're up to, make small talk, all that jazz. Turns out George was just banned from the frat for doing drugs. What did he do, you may ask? He doesn't remember, but according to Colin, they were at a party and George saw someone slip something into a girl's drink. Rather than take a logical approach, tell her not to drink it, take it from her and pour it out, so on and so forth, George ripped it from her hand and chugged it himself. I am having trouble stopping giggling. That totally makes frat boy logic. A friend was working in the O when she was going to school and a woman came in who had her arm broken when someone stole her purse. As that woman was being checked, a man came in who was hit by a truck after the driver saw him stealing a woman's purse and running away. Purse was returned. This kind of reminds me of something that happened to me once. I was rear-ended at a stoplight, and as I got out of my car to speak to the other driver, he threw his car into reverse and fled the scene. A police station was a block away, so I drove over to make a report. I'm crying and trying to stay calm but clearly upset. 2 minutes after I start giving my story, a woman bursts in, saying she just saw a hit and run and she got the plate number. Then she sees me and recognizes me immediately. It was my accident that she saw. She was a little bit older, the mother of a cop actually. She totally saved my butt. The dirtball who drove off ended up paying for everything. One day my mother was sitting on a crowded tram. Beside her was some punk with safety pins on his clothes chewing a wad of gum. Opposite was a woman with a little girl, maybe about 8 years old. The kid is swinging her legs like kids do and keeps kicking my mom in the shins. Mom politely asks her to stop. The kid's mother tells her that she won't tell the kid to stop because her parenting coach has said she has no right to impose rules on her kid's choices and that everybody should be able to do whatever they want, whenever they want. Tram pulls in, and the punk beside my mother takes the gum out of his mouth, reaches over, squishes it between the lady's eyebrows, winks at ma'am, and leaves. This is glorious. It's got a delicious element of meanness, but the meanness is entirely in the service of showing the mom how stupid her parenting beliefs are. Would pay to have seen this. 1998. Tense elections in the Caribbean. Dominican Republic. Guys campaigning off a truck dropping free produce to locals. Some lady down the road from my aunt's house got hit with 40 pounds of a plantain batch to her face. She got up, smiled at the free food, and limped away happily. Trust fund kid and his clique that would show up to your random college party with a literal trunk load of booze and drugs. It was his mission to turn parties into shit shows, likely for his own entertainment. He was just a really nice and fun person too. If it weren't for the fact he'd shrug off throwing down $1,000 on booze, you'd never guess he was anything but just a nice hard-working college-age kid. When I was like 11, I was at the beach with family. I found this stuff called fart spray, exactly what it sounds like, and really wanted it. But my dad said no. My aunt decided it'd be funny to buy me it and torture her brother, so she bought it in secret. We met my dad and some other family to all ride the shuttle further down the boardwalk. I couldn't hold my excitement and blabbed immediately about my new purchase. My dad took it from me and scolded my aunt. I sat down defeated. Few minutes later, this drunk lady and her friends get on the bus, clearly out doing a night of bar hopping. The one lady is being really loud and cussing a lot. My dad asked her to tone it down and was berated with profanities. He sat quietly through it. Then as the lady went to get off the bus, I see him hit her with a squirt from the fart spray. tipping the waitress like 40%, but at least 10% of that in loose change. In middle school, we ran out of money to leave a good tip, so we left about $15 worth of Jelly Belly jelly beans that we'd bought at the candy store. There was a playground by my childhood home that was broken and fenced off for several months. I set it on fire, and after it burned down they replaced it within a few weeks. Jesus. I don't know whether to shame you for being an arsonist or congratulate you for helping the children have fun. When I was in high school, there was one kid who was about a foot taller than everyone in the class and built like a rhino. He would beat up kids every day for no reason and would get away with it because no one would do anything about it. One day we had a casual teacher spot him from across the school beating on some younger kids. This teacher ran at him and hit him like a train. Flipped this kid like an egg. The bully left the school a few weeks later and the teacher lost his job. But he will always be remembered as the one who saved the school. I've been out of school now for a few years and it still comes up in conversation. I saw a man get the ever-loving shit kicked out of him for hitting his dog. My two cousins, 4 and 6 respectively, were picking on my sister due to the very deserved fact that she didn't have a certain Barbie doll, forgot which kind, that they did. Cousin walks over, about 9 years old, takes the doll, snaps it in ducking half, walks away, sister sitting there smiling away. My two cousins later apologized to my sister, but my older cousin still laughs about that, even 3 years later. My late best friend was super into drinking whiskey and snorting coke. He got his tax return and decided to drink a fifth and do an 8-ball, and disappeared. About 6 hours later we hear something by the trash cans, and it's Pat with 2 full bags of litter. He walked the entire neighborhood twice picking up all the trash including the cigarette butts. My grandfather, when he was in about his 30s, was out of country for some reason I can't remember. The day before his flight back he got very sick. He could hardly get on the plane, but he was ready to get home. He was on the plane and noticed that no one had bought the seat next to him. He asked the flight attendant if he could use it to lie down and hopefully sleep off his illness, and she allowed him to. Well, a bit after the flight started, this very large man went on a very public rant about how his seat was too small. The flight attendant kindly informed the man that in the future he should buy 2 seats. Well, the man wouldn't have this, so he points to my sick grandfather and shouts that he shouldn't get 2 seats as he only needed 1. And that he should get my grandfather's 2 seats and take his 1. The flight attendant told the man that they would not be switching. The man only threw a bigger fit. After a while of this man acting like a very large baby, my grandfather willingly gave up his seats to the man to end his whining. So they switched. After a while my grandfather noticed that the man was reading this very large book. Eventually the large man fell asleep. In front of the entire plane my grandfather stood up, walked over to the sleeping man, tore out the last 5 pages of his book, and went and sat back down. No one said a word about it. I had a cousin with Downs. He lived with his parents. This was back in the 60s or 70s and they were the first ones in their neighborhood to get an electric dryer. My cousin asked a lot of questions about this and why they needed one, etc. His mom, exasperated, told him it was illegal to hang clothes to dry to get him to stop. It worked. Kinda. A couple of hours later a neighbor came over and told her that her son had run through the neighborhood and cut everybody's clotheslines, leaving their clean clothes on the ground. He had served up some justice. For my engineering senior design project, our team leader assigned me to research a bunch of businesses and hubs in our area to determine the cost of 3D printing a part that we needed for our project, then send him a report on what I learned. Instead of doing that, I ignored him and spent the day asking around until I found someone who would let me borrow their printer. Then I spent the next day teaching myself how to print the prototypes we needed, and I showed up at the next team meeting with a working prototype for our project that put us days ahead of schedule without doing a single objective I was assigned. Back in the day I went to Blockbuster to get a copy of the DVD extended edition of Lord of the Rings. It was a big deal at the time and I was worried it would be sold out. Stoner Clark told me that they were sold out but that the only one we have is the copy my boss told me to put aside for him. But he's always telling me to put customers first, so here you go. Thank you, Stoner Clark. I remember in middle school there was a lunch lady who would ever so slightly overcook cookies or pizza or fries from the snack line so that she could say that they were not suitable to sell, and then she would give them to the kids who were getting the shitty meal because they had no money in their lunch accounts. Was working at a coffee shop. This lady was on her phone and it was time to order. Generally I handle this by going lawful evil and asking as loudly as possible as many applicable questions that require more than a yes/no answer as I can think of. On this particular day the tall man behind her just starts screaming hang the phone up and order, then berates her publicly for being rude. It was everything I had ever wanted to say. He scared the crap out of the rude lady too. A kid in our area died by suicide. Hung himself from a tree in a somewhat public area. The family asked for the council to remove the tree but they refused unless a large amount of money was paid. Some guys I know of, who weren't related to the family, went out in the middle of the night and chopped the tree down by themselves. Consequences be damned. It was a really sad time and just warmed my heart. We have a few, technically illegal, graffiti artists around town, who all have different tags. They also seem to have different territories, as you only see one tag in any specific area. A lot of us love their work, and they all keep it G-rated so the city property owners never minded. Then, overnight, an extremely racist drawing appeared on a black business owner's front windows, along with a tag from a guy we'll call Jay. It was quickly removed, but understandably many people became worried about the graffiti artists in general. Over the next few days, Jay's entire territory was plastered with drawings from different tags. They covered every bit of his work with puppies, rainbows, cupcakes, anything considered cute. Each time he did a new one, it was covered up the next night. Eventually he stopped trying, and his territory remains a sort of neutral zone. Graffiti artists covering boring, depressing concrete walls with beautiful, colorful art, making the world a more interesting place. I built a store in Hollywood where the owner literally paid a graffiti artist to paint the outside of his store. The theory is that graffiti artists won't disrespect another artist by defacing his work. I was on the subway with a friend and all the seats were taken. She was sitting, I was standing up. There was a pregnant lady and two old ladies coming in from the next step. No one was willing to give up their seat and she couldn't decide who to offer the seat to. Without saying anything she just gets up and walks away and let them duke it out for the seat. Maybe it's more chaotic neutral? Lawful neutral? My sister's valedictorian began roasting people, including himself, at graduation, and called out a guy for cheating on his girlfriend with multiple other girls. Restaurant. Down a cook. Down two servers. Getting busy. Both cook and server doing their best. One mother from a table steps up, talks to server, and suddenly she's delivering plates to tables, taking drink orders and delivering for a solid half an hour until another server rocks up for work. Hope like mad they got their meal calmed. A guidance counselor just gave me the answer key to a Texas history final so that I could pass high school. An algebra teacher did the same thing with an algebra final answer key. I'd been homeless, parents both dead from drug overdoses, had done time in foster care, which made me miss a ton of school. I was working 30 hours per week and I was accepted into college across the country. They said, "You'll never use this shit again in your life. We're not going to let these subjects be the ones that make you fail high school after everything you've done to not drop out." So I passed those classes with a high C. I'm not greedy, and I went on to college, and have a pretty great life now because they chose not to be petty tyrants and force a homeless kid with dyscalculia to repeat a school year just to learn algebra. My city has a monthly anarchy fair at the park. They will give food to the homeless, do free bike repairs, and do free medical checkups there as well. Only heard about it on Reddit, but I thought it was neat. I was at college and walking down the street. I saw what I thought was a friend about to get in a huge fight with another group. I'm white and they were all black. I thought it was the black fraternity I was friends with getting into a fight between themselves. I ran over screaming not to fight and saying things like, "You're all ducking idiots, don't do this." Everyone stopped hitting and yelling at each other when I ran over. It turns out there were two different groups who were on campus for a big party in the event center. They were so confused about a white guy running over that they all got weirded out, stopped fighting, and just walked away from each other. I didn't know any of them, but I prevented a gang fight, and it's one of my proudest stupid moments. Was out running in a park and saw some kid's dog running away from him straight towards me. It didn't look like they were playing, but that the kid was actually struggling to get his dog back. I roared and charged straight at the dog, who immediately ran back to its owner. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.